Okay, so this tutorial I'm going to offer some suggestions on maybe how to approach some rigging, um, especially when you have a model that isn't in a classic T pose. If that were the case, I think we could probably just use the human IK, which we might use for the control rig. Here, I think also worth noting is that we're not trying to rig this so we can do full-blown animations. We really just want to set up a rig so that we can pose the character easily and then freeze the geometry and do some renders. So we're going to end up creating a skeleton. It's kind of like the one that I've got here, but we're going to do this from scratch because we're going to run into several things. So let's go ahead and just delete this. This is a character modeled by Tyler. In the character, and I guess he did this in the character modeling class and as part of his senior studio. So I guess the issue here is that with the classic T-pose, we can keep things pretty straight. Makes things a lot easier, but this was modeled in ZBrush in this kind of relaxed natural pose, which some people would argue it makes for a little better deformation when you're animating. It does not make it easier for setting up a rig, and we'll look at why here in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the right view, and we'll start with the leg, I guess. So I'm going to just double click on the joint tool, reset the tool in case anything was changed, and I'm going to click kind of at the hip here, and then towards the knee. As you can see right off the bat, when I first clicked on the joint, it was vertical. It aligned itself to the world axis. But as soon as I created a new joint, this joint now repositioned itself so it aims at this one. And as I come down here, we're going to see the same thing. So you can see as I move this around and I let go, the knee joint is going to reposition itself, reorient itself, so that it's pointing towards this one. Again, this one's totally lined up along the world axis, and I'm going to click, and once I let go, you can see it reorients itself. So that's great. That's awesome, right? Let's go back to our perspective. So I did that in the side, so we got a nice straight joint here. When this joint rotates, it rotates like the knee is supposed to, as a hinge, right? We don't want our knee doing this. This is bad, right? I think we can all agree that's probably some surgery for your ACL. We don't want that to happen to our character. The problem is if I start to move this over in place, you can see that doesn't, how are we going to line that up? And if I put this in place and then I start to slide this over here and vice versa, these are not lined up anymore, right? This is set to rotate like this. That is not correct. That's not going to help us. So and each one of these issues has its own little mini solution. So here what we're going to try to do is just rotate it over into place, just twisting it, and that's going to be pretty good, and we're going to call that good. It's not the best solution. As you can see, it's still not quite oriented correctly here for the foot, because we're just going to pose this character. That will probably be all right. Let's go to the right hand view. See, it's pretty close to that right joint. If I start moving this, though, I'm going to create problems. I'm going to change that. So a little bit of finessing maybe to make that work where we want it to. All right, so but that should work okay. That's not so bad. All right, let's go up to the painful one. And that would be the arm here. So how are we going to deal with this? This is not, it's in a relaxed position, but if I draw this out in a flat view, I guess we could try to let's do here, front view. So let's show how this works. So if I went here, I'm going to click for the shoulder, and then the elbow, and the wrist. So that's not bad. Problem is, they don't line up with each other, right? And this one really isn't where that needs to be. It's not in the best place towards that elbow. And some of this, maybe slight inaccuracies in the model as far as how it's set up, but maybe we can do just a little repositioning with this joint. This one, however, is going to be a pain. That's just not quite right. We could, maybe try to make some guesses. But hopefully this is going to be relatively close, right? We didn't make too many changes to that setup. So let's go ahead. If I go to the rotate, you can see it's rotating correctly here, right? That looks right. If we fold that, that would come back pretty much close to the shoulder. But the x-axis is not pointing down the joint. That's a problem, okay? You almost always want to have these joints pointing towards the next one. Because we've moved that didn't happen correctly. So how do we deal with that problem? So I guess the easiest way, well, there's several different ways. I don't know if there's the easiest way. What we're going to do here is try to change the local rotation axis. So to get at that, we need to go into component mode. There's the object's rotation axis, but then there's the local axis that only really happens with the joints themselves. So I'm going to turn the default, basically, you'd probably see is this. So I go into component mode, and I'm going to turn off points because I don't want to select those. And if I go over to Maya's wonderful little question mark icon, this is its way of saying we're not really sure where to put all this stuff. And you can see there's local rotation axis. I just right-clicked on that icon, image planes, and mesh multi-components. So we're just going to turn on local rotation axis, and you can see these are now visible on the object. And if I select them, I can manipulate them without moving the object itself, right? So I'm going to leave that in its order, and with a little bit of investigation, I can go ahead, just ignore my email. I'm trying to, at least. You can see because I drew that out as a straight line and then rotated it, at least it was on a relatively flat plane. The one thing ideally I would have done is set this up in such a way that this would be a straight line. And there's several ways to do that, but I just eyeballed it. I guess it's not too bad. Right? So at least here, this would deform. Need to go into object mode. There we go. So if I go back into component mode, I guess I can turn that off. I'm not going to use that for now. Okay. So local rotation axis is very important if you were doing the hands to be able to orient these correctly so that when you rotate the fingers, they curl the right way. I think we can all agree on that. Let's go back down. All right, so we have those two setups there. I'm going to go back to the right side. Now what I'm going to do is try to draw the center section here. So this is where we're going to put kind of the root controller for the hips, and then maybe 1, 2. In the spine, we do have a lot of vertebrae that go all the way through, but the rib cage kind of locks that in. So there's really not as much bending here in the center because of the rib cage. So I'm just going to skip up here close to where the center of that would be. Kind of where the collarbone is going to join that. Then I'll come up to close to the neck. And you can put some extra neck joints in there if you wanted. I'm just going to finish all the way up. I'm even going to add, I'm going to click on one of these joints to activate. So I clicked right on that, and then I'm going to click over here to add a new joint. This is just going to help when I bind it so that the chin stays where it needs to be. So because I did that in the side, you can see it went right up the middle, and I can select this joint here and then the root and hit P for parent, right? So I can get that parented the correct way, and then I need to add another joint in here for the collarbone. So let's go back to the front view, and again grab our joint tool up here, and I'm going to click and create this here. I'm not sure this is really the best orientation or place for that shoulder joint, but also it's going to become a mess if I put it up here closer. It was going to create an awkward bend, I guess. So I wanted to try to do this in the in the straightest line I could, right? So I'll put the collarbone there. I'm going to reposition in a second, but I also want to put a joint here on the side, and I'm going to hit G again, and put another joint here. And these are going to get parented. Oops, perspective. So those are right there in along the center. That's pretty good. And that collarbone's about where it needs to be. So let's just go ahead and parent everything up. So shoulder to the collarbone, P for parent, collarbone to the spine, P for parent. And then we'll take this little, again, these are just to help with the skin weighting, so that when the arm deforms, it doesn't create a big cavity here. We're still going to have to edit it, but at least it'll be close. Parent that one there. Select and then shift select parent. And then what we need to do is flip everything over to the other side. So we'll select the joint just off from the spine, skeleton and mirror joints. And if you open up the option, it's actually the Y and Z. I think the default is the XY, which I don't understand. Almost always you're using the Y and Z. And we'll go ahead and hit apply. Do this one on the end. And we don't want to select the center joint. It needs to know basically this one relative to its parent, which would be in the center or down the middle. We'll hit apply. And same thing here on the hip. Yay! Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. So that's the first part. So we've created a skeleton. Ideally we would name these shoulder and forearm and all that stuff, but we'll just leave that where it's at for now. I'm going to go ahead and stop this one. In the next one we'll talk about how to bind it really quick.